Hi, welcome. In the previous video, we created negative test data and we need to now check all the validations. That is, if we enter invalid data, then we should not be able to register. That is what we need to test. Now let's go to the test cases and check the test cases. So the first scenario is we enter invalid user ID and all the other fields are valid. That is, we'll enter valid inputs in all the other fields like password, confirm password, email, alternate email, mobile, and address. But user user ID has to be invalid. So in this particular case, we enter user ID as empty. Okay, that is invalid. And when if we try to register, it should give a message like please enter valid user ID. Okay, so now this test case we have to repeat with all different types of invalid user ID. So let's go to our negative test data. We will try out with Tom, then the third one Ocean India and underscore blah blah and empty field. Empty field we have tested. Now we will test the same with Tom. Okay, so we will enter invalid user ID as Tom because user ID has minimum 4 characters. Okay, so we'll enter Tom and then all the other fields has to be has valid input. Okay, so in that case also it will give a message to enter valid user ID when we try to register. So likewise, we will try out all types of invalid user ID. Okay, so that is our first test case, that we enter invalid user ID and all the other fields are valid. So, and that's how we have made sure that if we enter invalid user ID in any case, then our system will not register. And if it gets register, then we need to mention that in the test case file and set the status as fail. What is the other possibility? So now in the next test case, we will enter valid user ID, but now we will enter all different types of invalid password. Okay, so let's check the test data. Invalid password is empty field. Okay, we just enter nothing. Then a password which has minimum length as sorry, which has length as 7, um, because in our case password has to be minimum 8 or has 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 to have minimum 8 or more characters, but this particular password has 7 characters. And another scenario is when we enter a password that is greater than 30 characters. Okay, so now we have we enter invalid password but all the other fields are valid. Okay, so in that case we can just check the test data. In point number 2, when we are trying to enter password, we enter invalid password. Okay, so in that case when we try to register, it should give a message like please enter valid password. Okay, so we need to try out with all possible invalid passwords. So that was the second case. Now because confirm password has is similar to that of normal password, so I have not mentioned that, but we need to test for the same as well. Now let's check for email. So now we will enter all possible types of invalid email and we will make sure that other fields have valid data. So let's check uh, the test data. For email we have incorrect email like 1212, right? Numbers are not valid email, then only characters are not valid email, and all these list of data that we have mentioned, that is invalid email. Okay, so all the other fields are valid, but the fourth field that which mentions email, that is incorrect because we have entered an empty email. Okay, so in that case, if you try to register, it should say please enter valid email, right? So we need to try out with all possible incorrect or invalid email IDs, right? The next one is mobile. So we'll repeat the same for mobile. We will enter invalid mobile and all the other fields are valid. So let's check the test data. Invalid mobile could be either we don't enter anything in the mobile field, then it would be invalid, because invalid in our case mobile has to be 10 digit numbers. Then if we enter all characters, whether it should allow, no, it should say please enter valid mobile number. Then if we enter say only 9, that is invalid mobile number. Then something like alphanumeric characters, so all these are invalid mobile numbers. So we need to check with all types of invalid mobile numbers, and rest of the fields has to be valid. So in this case, if we enter 234, then it is an invalid mobile number, and if we try to register, it should say please enter valid mobile. Now one more scenario is when we enter password and confirm password. Okay, so these are negative scenarios. So here password and confirm password has to be same, right? But in this case we will enter different passwords. Okay, so whatever is there in the password, confirm password would not match with the password. Okay, as per example, all the other fields are has valid input data, but password is dairy milk and confirm password is chocobar. Okay, so when we register, password and confirm password has to be similar, but in this case we'll try different passwords. So in that case, registration should not happen, and we must get message like password and confirm password must match. And if we don't get a message like this, then obviously it is a bug, and we have to set the status as fail in the status column. Okay. While writing test cases, we never execute. We first write all types of test cases and we execute once all the test cases are written. That's why as of now the status field is empty and it has no data. But we need to check whether if we enter two different passwords, how the system will react. Similarly, we will test for home address. Okay, so all the fields are valid, only the home address has to be invalid. Uh, so in home address, if we enter empty home address, then it should not work. Okay, but in this particular test case, we are checking email and alternate email. We will enter all the fields as valid input, but in email and alternate email, which has to be different, we will enter same email ID. Okay, if you can see point number 4, it asks us to enter email, and point number 5 is alternate email. That is, it cannot be same as the email that is entered in the step number 4. So we have to enter two different email IDs. Okay, but you can check the test data. Here we have entered same email IDs in email and alternate email text box. So when we enter same email and alternate email, it should give a message like email and alternate email cannot be same. Okay, so likewise, we will check for all possibilities of invalid input data for all the fields, and we need to see that registration should not happen. Okay, so we have to mention all these things in negative test cases. Then one more negative test case is we first register a particular user ID with all valid entries, right? So registration is done. Now, what if we try to use the same data and try to register for the second time? Okay, so say first time we use the user ID as ABCDEF, and second time also we try to register with the same user ID. then we should get a message like user already registered. Okay, so we need to test that if we enter invalid inputs, okay, then system should not work, and that is what we have tested. In our case, we had the possibility to try out these many user IDs invalid, which had invalid entries, then password, confirm password, mobile, and email and address. Okay, so for this we have created negative test data, and we'll try all of them to make sure that if we enter invalid data, the system should not be able to register. Okay, so I hope you have understood what are positive test cases and negative test cases. And whenever we have a system where we need to provide data to it, we'll first try out with all positive data, and then we'll do negative testing where we'll try out with all negative data. And before doing that, we need to first create the test data. So for positive testing, we'll create positive test data, and for negative testing, we will create negative test data. Okay, so I hope you have understood the same. And for as far as registration are concerned, we have covered two topics: positive scenarios and negative scenarios, that is validation testing. Now let's see what more kind of test cases we can write. Thank you.